It's Wrestling Observer Radio. I'm Garrett Gonzales alongside Dave Meltzer, and today we're talking to Will Cooling from Fighting Spirit Magazine. Will, what's going on?
There is so much going on. This has been one of the busiest periods for British wrestling in a long time.
That was kind of a silly question on my end, I admit. We're gonna talk about a lot of stuff today, and definitely want to talk about a lot of the stuff going on in the UK. But I guess my first question is, because it's so timely and newsworthy right now, the whole WWE and Saudi Arabia thing. Like, what are your thoughts about what's going on there?
So I'm a bit of a politics nerd, and I have a friend who's an IR lecturer, and I was talking to him about this. The key thing you've got to get across is just what a crazily reckless thing the Saudis did. Almost every embassy in the world is bugged, and the Saudi embassy in Istanbul is right at the bottom of the list as one that may not be. The Turkish authorities knew they'd done this to this journalist. The second it happened, they have audio, they have video. The Saudis are screwed. This is a really bad situation. I mean, this ultimately could lead to MBS being thrown overboard. And if you're WWE, you're in a terrible, terrible position.
They're in a terrible position right now, honestly, yeah.
I mean, it is the most reckless thing I can think of any government to do. Like, this is just, all governments, particularly ones like Saudi Arabia, do dodgy things. But to kill somebody in your own embassy, it's just unheard of. I mean, I asked my friend, this is a guy who's writing a book about the Iraq War and stuff like this. I asked him, can you think of somebody killing a dissident in their own embassy in a sensitive foreign country? And he was like, no, this is completely unprecedented. And when you hear the deal, we'll spare the listeners. You hear the details of what they did to the guy.
Yeah.
Oh, it's grim. It's really grim.
And the fact that the guy was a reporter with the Washington Post, who lived in the United States, although he was not an American citizen. And, another aspect of this is, from a WWE standpoint, I mean, it's a weird thing because, there are now companies and media companies, LA Times and others, that pulled out of doing things in Saudi Arabia this weekend. And there's pressure is going to be very strong on WWE to pull out. But then there's the other pressure, which is this is a 10-year deal, and it's the money over the 10 years is probably in the range of $450 million. Nobody knows the exact number because it's not released, but that's probably a pretty rough estimate of it. And if they pull out, it's a breach of that contract. And so, I mean, they're essentially they're public relations screwed if they do the show, and they're financially screwed if they don't do the show. And they're very public relations. I mean, they're very public relations oriented right now anyway. But, then they've got the stock price. I mean, it's such a weird position. I mean, the deal, when this deal was made, when you make a deal with something like this, the chances, because the chances of something backfiring were pretty high to begin with. And this was before they did that first show. And then with the nature of the first show and what it ended up turning out to be, it was not just a wrestling show. It was just a wrestling show would be one thing, but it was clearly not just a wrestling show. It was basically it was a deal where, they're out there, lauding this government, the progressive government and everything like that. And, obviously this bit them really bad from the moment they left the country. And everything that happened in that country, time after time over the last few months, and then this right now, which is, by far the worst of anything. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's worth going back to that Great Royal Rumble because it wasn't just the Vision 2030 stuff I was saying. There were more subtle things as well, like it was bathed in green, the Saudi sword dance, which is quite a controversial thing. That was being embedded into the various images of the presentation. Like, they were going all in on kind of sucking up to the Saudis with how they were producing it. Yeah. I think it's a bigger story than just the PR. You have to remember that Linda McMahon's in the cabinet.
That's right. Absolutely.
One of the things I've always said is it seems a bit of a coincidence that Linda gets put into the cabinet and then suddenly the Saudis want to give WWE lots of money. And, there's a history of the McMahons donating money to both Trump's foundation and Trump's PAC. But now you've got this issue of you've got a company owned by the family of a Republican cabinet member. You've got a show that is going to feature a Republican politician, and the Republicans are already under pressure because of being too close to Saudi, being too slow to condemn the Saudis. What are Trump and the Kushners up to Saudi Arabia? And that is why you're starting to get people like even Lindsey Graham saying, actually, no, WWE needs to pull this show. I mean,
that one. Now we have a Republican senator saying that, besides the Democrat senators, which didn't surprise me at all.
Well, the fact that Murphy did it, like someone in Connecticut, a company state, that was surprising.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I put it this way. Maybe they'll do this show. There is no way this deal is going to last the full 10 years. Saudi Arabia is just going to get too hot over the next few years. It's going to be one of these things where it's like people will do business for them in terms of arms and stuff like that. But this idea is going to be a country respectable. Companies that want to seem respectable to the American public have high-profile dealings. I think that's quickly going to go away.
Yeah, it's this is a deal where, I mean, even the fact that they made that statement yesterday was the first time, because when WWE makes a statement like that, that's basically the thing of like, okay, we know it's an issue, because if they didn't know it was an issue, they would ignore it. So they know it's an issue where, we're doing this. So and they are making, there is talk internally. They are making alternate plans, backup plans, whatever you would want to call them, provided they have to pull out. And obviously for financial reasons, they don't want to pull out. But if they have to pull out, I mean, it's not like they're going today. A week ago they may have said, well, we're not going to pull out, but today it's very much like, we got to watch how the wind blows. And it very well could happen, and could happen imminently, honestly, or it may not, but it's something that they're obviously they're monitoring. They are monitoring this very closely. They're not sitting out there going like, we're just gonna, we're gonna be able to do this, and everyone's gonna forget this story tomorrow, type of a thing. So it's going to be. Go ahead.
It's a really awkward situation for them, though, because obviously the nature of pro wrestling is, they can't go dark until they know what they're doing. They have to keep promoting this
right
next week.
Well,
so on Monday they're going to have to start talking about Saudi Arabia again.
Monday is going to be really tough because going on that show, and then the other thing, and this is really a minor part of it, but it's still something. Is they've advertised these matches, and I mean the two key things is you got Brock Lesnar, and then you've got the Undertaker Shawn Michaels. The tag team match with Undertaker and Kane and Shawn Michaels and Triple H. And, Brock Lesnar's only doing this match because, his deal's up. He's doing this match because it was a ridiculous amount of money. And I'm certain that, Shawn Michaels, for the same reason, he didn't come out of retirement for a Survivor Series payoff, if you know what I mean. And Brock Lesnar certainly didn't delay his training for the UFC championship for a Survivor Series payoff. So if they, the logical thing is that, we just take the matches and we put them on Survivor Series. That's our next pay-per-view. But it's just not that simple, especially with Shawn and Brock in particular. And then what do you do? Because then it's sort of like, I think Shawn, in his position, I think that he kind of has to do the match and just, oh well, right? I'm going to do the match and I'm not going to make the money I expected, but he's close with Triple H, and he's going to understand that. Brock, on the other hand, is a very different animal. And, is he going to go and do a favor and go, okay, or does WWE go to Brock and go, which I don't see them doing, going like, okay, all those millions that you were going to get for one match, we're still going to pay you for Survivor Series. And so that's this, like I said, that's
also with Brock as well, it's only a few weeks delay, but that actually might be quite important for him in terms of when he wants to fight.
It cuts it close for sure, and as far as what he's willing to do, as far as take bumps and everything like that. If we're going to go with the idea he's going to fight late January, and that, believe me, with everything that's going on in UFC, nothing's clear on that either, because DC may fight John Jones after all instead of Brock Lesnar, and then that kind of leaves Brock Lesnar without a fight right away. And So if that, but who knows what's going to happen there? But the point is, the original plan was DC and Brock Lesnar in late January, and DC also could get hurt in the Garden because it's a stupid fight, and he's going in hurt. But if we go with, like I said, the late January time frame for the DC Brock Lesnar fight, that would be, he would be starting that camp in November, and I don't think you want to start the camp and take a whole bunch of big bumps the day before you start the camp or right as you're starting, because he's going to 10 weeks minimum, or he'd have to be in camp. So you're right, that extra 2 weeks is actually very important when it comes to Brock. Yeah.
Just to be clear, it seems like if they did have to pull out, they've promised all these matches. SummerSlam Survivor Series would seem like the natural place to do that stuff. Is that what you meant when you said Plan B, or they have other?
I was told that they would like to do the matches that they've advertised at Survivor Series if this thing falls through. But the problem is with Shawn and Brock, it's kind of a weird situation. And what they would do, and that one night World Cup thing. But they've already started that, so maybe they're already committed to that direction. Because I heard the World Cup thing is kind of like that was done specifically for the Saudis. That's not really what they were planning for Survivor Series. And they had stuff, and I don't know what it is, but they had other stuff planned for Survivor Series. So it does throw everything out of whack. But the story is much bigger than WWE booking,
right?
But WWE booking is still part of the story.
Absolutely.
That whole thing in the World Cup, another thing, because the Saudis hate Qataris. The Qataris have the Football World Cup. This is the thing. Is like they are WWE for their presentation and booking are doing so many things to kind of help with Saudi talking points. One thing is worth saying. Someone on Twitter went to Dave, could they use the London House show to move some of these matches? And that would be a bad idea for two reasons.
They're not, but I don't see them doing that at all.
Even if they were, it'd be a bad idea for two reasons. One is, there's so much pent-up demand for a big WWE show in the UK, you're not going to waste it on a show you've already sold. Secondly, even if you were to do it, you'd have, they're coming to London because of the problems with Saudi Arabia. That would be the angle all the London press would have. So Survivor Series is the obvious place to move these matches. Worst case scenario, you try and do them on Raw and get a big rating, but yeah, Survivor Series.
But you're not gonna put Shawn Michaels' first match in 8.5 years or a Brock Lesnar match on Raw. That's just not going to happen. I don't think. But yeah, the other thing too is right after Saudi Arabia is the UK tour. So even if they were going to do it in the United States, it'd have to be Survivor Series, because they're not going to do that. They're not going to do it on a Monday Night Raw house show in the UK. That's not going to happen. No. Yeah. So the World Cup, and I didn't even make that connection, and obviously I should have, is the fact that they're calling this the World Cup. There's a reason they're calling this the World Cup, and that's right.
So this story is not going to end today. There's going to be so much more to talk about. We have other stuff going on, so I want to give us an opportunity to look at some other stuff. So people who have been reading their Observer the last 2 weeks, in the New Japan section, there's been some discussion about management and the new management that has come in, and maybe some unrest with some of the wrestlers. And I kind of wanted to bring that topic up. Will, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to talk about Dave with this, but what are your thoughts on the stories that Dave's been writing about New Japan?
They're really interesting. One of the issues you have is obviously you have people in New Japan that like to do kind of almost semi-shoot storylines. So obviously Kenny versus Tanahashi, there's a lot of stuff, work shoot stuff. Obviously being the Elite, there's a lot of work shoot stuff. So where does the show end and where does reality begin? So you look at Twitter today, Tama Tonga's been going crazy at Kenny Omega, and Kenny Omega's going crazy back. So it makes it quite difficult to understand where's the actual story, and I'm sure. Well, I know
the actual story. Believe me, I know the actual story. But the basic situation. It's what I've written is the story. And it's funny because one of the reasons that the stuff is going on with Tama Tonga is because one of the people who complained the first complaints that I heard I mean, were the fact that Tama Tonga was very upset about being disciplined, and this goes back a long time, which is why I think some of this stuff has come up, which is a half, it is storyline and it's not storyline as far as this Twitter stuff that's going back and forth. I don't know exactly, I mean, there is some reality to that, but I mean, as far as the story itself, which is completely different from storyline, is that, a lot of things are happening involving the new management. There's been a lot of, they were very happy. Everybody was very happy with the company growing. The whole thing of like, we've got this all-star team of talent. We've got this all-star team we got this great booker. Everything's going great. Business is great, growing every year. And then Kidani decided to make a change. And that's fine. Make a change, a guy who's, got more international business experience and all that. So at first, it was, this is a positive. Let's see what happens. And people liked Harold, at first. But then as time went on, him and Michael Craven's the guy who has been, he's the one with the most heat on him right now. Those guys, all of a sudden, it's like they took the position of guys that everybody liked and trusted. And now you've got this situation where, and this is across the board. It's not like people are thinking it's three people or it's five people. I can't say everyone, because there's always going to be exceptions. And there's also people who are half office anyway, and people who need it for their job. And again, nobody that was on the team in G1 on the last day of G1, okay, the last day of G1. Nobody who was on that team at that time wanted to leave. Now, is it possible they could leave? Yeah, because obviously there's a lot of contracts up. There's a lot of potential offers from WWE. There's a lot, it's a very, though that situation is going to go the way the wind blows, and the wind blows differently regularly, and nobody's made a decision. There are guys who thought they made a decision that are reconsidering, but there's no decisions out there that have been made. There's one. I don't want to get into individual people right now, but the basic situation is that I guess the way I look at it, because you and I have been talking about this, there's two things there's two ways this thing can go, and I've actually talked with some of the guys too. This story, now that it is out, management can look and just go, okay, because some of it is just misunderstanding and not understanding how to talk to wrestlers. And if you're not a wrestler, it's hard. I mean, I have the same problem, because I'm not a wrestler and I talk to wrestlers about wrestling. And when it's business, they're usually pretty cool. But if it's, body of the matches, it's like, even the people who are friendly, it's like, you really don't want to hear someone tell you you're doing something too dangerous that's not a wrestler that's never taken bumps, even though in the end, it's like, I think I'm doing it for their own good type of a thing, but you know how that goes. So the whole thing is the whole thing is that you have people who are not in wrestling who are big fans. I mean, Craven's a big fan. Harold May's a big fan. Okay, so it's not like they're business people who have no knowledge of wrestling. They have some knowledge of wrestling, but as far as dealing with wrestlers, this is all new to them. And wrestlers are a very unique species, just like football players are a unique species and everything like this. So they can look at this and go, okay, we're going to try to amend, solve this. We've got a little bit of an issue. Let's solve it. Let's smooth everything over and let's go. And business is generally still great and we'll go on our way. Or they can look at it and go, we have an issue and who's talking. And the sad part is that my gut says it's going to end up being the second one and not the first one. The first one's what pretty much everyone's hoping for. The second one is, who's talking, what's going on. We don't need these guys. And it builds a chasm and it gets worse, because one of the feelings that the problem is that the guys are thinking that they're workers on an assembly line and not stars. They're not, that there's a mentality that we can just be replaced. And when you have that mentality, it's like, well, what keeps us here other than we're having loads of fun, we're working with the best guys, we're having the best matches, and we're making good money. But, could we make more money elsewhere? Yes, but, lifestyle-wise, which is more fun, this is probably more fun. So, there's, what I mean? Then that's a battle that every one of those guys every guy on the roster. That not so much the Tanahashi because he's a unique character, but everybody else on the roster who's a top guy who could go to WWE, go to WWE and be a player. In the back of their heads, it's like, well, the potential for top money in WWE is still much higher than New Japan and will be. The potential for failure for the guys who are already established is also higher in WWE. So it's a risk. The schedule is much, much harder, but, the physical aspect of it is less hard, but the mental aspect is harder. So you got all these little things that are balancing. But the point is like, this is a really, especially this all coming down, in October, because November, December is when these guys are going to make decisions, and all of them. And so that's kind of the situation that we're in right now.
One thing I've noticed, it feels like obviously New Japan's going through growing pains, and they are running a lot more major shows. Like you look like usually the Destruction Tour doesn't have a major match, and instead they did a mega Ishii. Right. During that tour. And
Tanahashi
Okada. Then they had the major tag in Long Beach. Then they had major shows for King of Pro Wrestling. They're doing major shows in November for Power Struggle. It feels like a bit like 97 WCW, where one of the selling points to the guys was this is an easier schedule. Company's hot, and actually they're just making people do a lot more, and so that's got away on the calculus as well.
Well, the intensity of the schedule is really made difficult because the way that they do their promoting, we've talked about this many times, is they wait until the last major show to announce the next major show, and now this is every week. So you're doing like Sumo Hall on a 1 week build, and they got away with it, and they packed the building. It obviously, I think it hurt Long Beach. I think it hurt the Cow Palace. I think both of those shows would have done better with more focus on the matches themselves going in, but the way they do business, they don't do that. And in the American market, it's going to be tougher than the Japanese market. But even the Japanese market, the fact that they're very hot right now and they can sell out with 1 week of, 1 week of promoting of a show is very good. But you can't count on that happening forever. That's what you do when you're super hot. But you're not, even if they maintain all this talent and they grow and these young guys get better, you can't count on the hotness of a product. There's always going to be ebbs and flows. So, that's one of the, that issue when you're running, like, again, we had essentially a major show every single week. And that's a hard, and again, for the guys, and you can talk about the thing, like real, we all thought coming off of G1 that King of Pro Wrestling was going to be Tanahashi, Okada, and Omega and Ishii. And, and those matches were both absolutely incredible. And they were better than the matches in King of Pro Wrestling, which is supposed to be the much bigger show.
And also, you look at it, for some of the guys, they've got a major show this weekend. You got Ishii Suzuki in London. You got Kushida going up against David Starr. Sanada and Evil's going up against Ring Camp. The guys are actually on a bit of a treadmill at the moment in terms of major matches.
Right. And also you're talking about going, like the whole thing, they're in 3 different continents, doing this stuff each week. There's especially the certain guys like Kushida, who's a real workhorse, who's, wants to work everywhere. And he was in England when I was in England. I saw him, I bumped into him at the hotel. Yeah. And then he's in Japan, and then he's in the US, and then he's back in England, so.
The one thing that, just in reading, going back to what you wrote, I think the one thing that kind of crystallized that this is kind of a big deal for me is when you said it's both the Americans and the Japanese wrestlers, because the business, the Japanese business is kind of the thing that stirs the drink for them. But to then sort of alienate that side of things as well, that's a scary kind of thing to think about.
Well, again, look. I think that they're pretty confident, and I am too, that as far as it's not going to be a giant mass exodus. It's not like going to be. I don't think so anyway. And again, it could be that nobody leaves.
There may not be any exodus.
There may not be any exodus at all, maybe except for maybe one guy, and maybe not even one guy. But the situation is you still have the difference between that great locker room, everybody happy, to this thing of if it's not smoothed over, these type of little things, and it's not a little thing anymore. It started as a little thing and it got bigger and bigger. It started with somebody saying something that, again, I mean, to me, it was like, why would you say that? But it wouldn't like drive me crazy. Right. But it made some guys unhappy, and I don't really want to talk about what it is, but it was something that, I could understand why would make them unhappy. Mm-hmm. But then it built and built, and there's just. But with the Japanese, I mean, the thing with the Japanese is that, they were very comfortable with what was going on. And, you're in a company where every year you're growing since 2000, whatever it is, 2010, 2011, when they were at rock bottom, and they grew like crazy every year. So it's a real happy place to be. And again, the Japanese take great pride in the product. In their minds, it's the best product in the world. And a lot of people will agree with that. But in their minds, it is. And so there you have that. And then it's like, why, they were comfortable with the guys in a certain position, and now there are new guys in the position who, especially for the Japanese, even more than the Americans, because they're not Japanese in the positions. And in a Japanese company, you're pro wrestling company anyway, not necessarily a major company, but Japanese pro wrestling company, for the most part, you have the Japanese in those key positions. I mean, the Funks were very key in All Japan in the glory days of All Japan, but the Funks also had the great respect of all of those guys, because all those Japanese wrestlers grew up with the Funks as superstars, and and they were wrestling guys, so it didn't matter that much that they weren't Japanese, and they were considered pretty much Japanese anyway. But this is people who were from the business world coming in, and it's just a different dynamic. That's all.
And a lot of morale issues are simply about appreciation.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the whole thing. It's like, I mean, thank you. You did a great job. Thanks for helping build the company. So, and the other thing too, though, in contract period, this is when it comes to sports, there's give and take. Mm-hmm. It's like in contract period, the management side is going to be, we want to get the best value, for the least amount of money, whether it's an NBA team, so an NBA team, are they going to go in there with a negotiation with a big player and go in there, they're give and take, kind of where you're going to end up, but you're still going to say things in those meetings when the guy's agent comes in and goes, this guy is the greatest player in the world, he's doing blah, 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 and you're on the other side of the table and you're going like, well, revenue this and this and this and this, and it becomes the contentious thing. And with a lot of wrestlers not having representation, and they're actually themselves in the middle of this, it can hurt feelings, especially when they've broken their backs or broken their necks, or had these incredible matches all year long on this, and a harder schedule than the year before. So yeah, that's all part of the play too.
Yeah, negotiations. You kind of have to understand that whole thing and go in there with the business mindset of understanding sort of both sides. But of course, feelings and emotions and frustrations and everything can get involved in that stuff too, which is why it's hard.
Yeah, yeah. Anything else real quick before we move on? Will?
No, all sounds good to me.
Okay, so the next thing we want to talk about is partially why it was so interesting to bring you on, Will, is because of the new WWE UK TV show that was announced on the network, and then as it's related to Rev Pro doing TV as well, and sort of what's the whole scope and the landscape there.
Well, never say WWE is not subtle, because they've had this stuff in the can. I think the first taping was the end of July, and it just so happens they're rushing it out the same week Rev Pro's TV taping. TV starts on Free Sports. Right. So, I mean, the key thing is, so WWE, their TV show have been taping. They've done 2 tapings. Their third taping is this weekend.
Right. So
they've got a lot of footage.
They'll have 18 weeks of tapings as of the end of this weekend.
Yeah. So they've got a lot of stuff in the can. Goes out on the network every Wednesday at 8 p.m. UK time, 3 p.m. Eastern time. I mean, it's actually a bad sign for WWE. The fact that they couldn't get this on TV is less alarming than it may seem. There's always been issues with Sky not wanting to take extra WWE content mid TV deal. Things like Tough Enough. So the Steve Austin season of Tough Enough wasn't shown on UK TVs. It took us a few months to get SmackDown when it started. So it always takes a while for Sky to warm up for extra WWE content. I think the bigger issue is we still don't know where WWE's ending up in terms of Raw and SmackDown. Barrios was talking earlier this year that they wanted to announce the UK deal this year, and there's still no sniff of where Raw and SmackDown will be shown at the end of the current deal, which ends at the same time as the American one. And that, to me, suggests there's an issue, because you look at the view. Last time I looked, because they've now stopped published the viewing figures. Viewing figures haven't improved since they nosedived last year. So they're looking at best getting around 50,000 people watching the premiere broadcast of Raw within a week. Sky is clearly downsizing. And they've lost Italian football, they've lost Spanish football, they've lost the PGA Golf Championships. The feud with BT is over. Sky and BT have made up. So that rivalry that meant that WWE got such a big deal last time, that rivalry is over. BT and Sky are friends now. So this is actually quite alarming. And then you have all the issues with Sky's takeover. So to me, it's like the fact that they can't say we've renewed for Sky for a few years. That's the bigger story, because they clearly wanted to announce it this year and they can't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the one thing is like there's Sky and WWE have this relationship going back 30 years or so, but WWE did not inform Sky of the network, even though I thought everyone knew in the business, but apparently not. And one of the points of the last deal that they signed, the key point was all the pay-per-views, and they would be cut in on the revenue of all the pay-per-views. And then the network essentially, and this is one of the reasons it took so long to get the network off the ground in the UK, was that, that they were supposed to have exclusivity on those pay-per-views. And now that exclusivity on pay-per-view essentially means almost nothing because of the network.
And and the network, much more clear, the network and what WWE is doing on YouTube, much more clearly competes against Sky than the USA Network, because Sky is a subscription service. I mean, I've subscribed to Sky, I've cancelled Sky several times, and when you do either, they ask you, which sports are you interested in? Because it's not the viewing figures, because they're not looking at advertisements for things like WWE. It's how many people are subscribing to Sky Sports due to these sports we're showing. And what's happened is, because of how much money football got, because of how much money cricket got, they are starting to squeeze those secondary sports that don't actually bring that many additional subscribers, and they are being much tighter with what they're willing to spend. La Liga could legitimately claim to be the third or fourth biggest franchise they had on the Sky Sports platform. So the fact that they lost that and were willing to walk away and lose it last year to BT just shows you how much they're looking at the cost-benefit analysis of every sport they get. So I mean, I think it's a big deal. I think you can't assume WWE and Sky renew at all. Partly because, as I said, WWE have done short practice with Sky with things like the network, which may have created bad feeling between the two groups.
Now, was it EPL that got the lower rights fees this last year?
So yeah, they got what they ended up doing all right, because they increased the number of games they were selling, but in terms of per game they got less. And the key reason is because BT is no longer going full throttle in the rights market. Because the reason why BT entered. Okay, so
stop right there. So does that have to do with the UFC leaving BT, which is happening at the end of this year?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So BT, basically, the reason why BT entered pay sport market was because, so for those who know, BT is it used to be the government-owned telephone company. So it started to have a monopoly of telephones. And that ended up being a monopoly of internet provision as well. And its dominant position has been gradually being stripped away by new entrants when it was privatized. What Sky was doing was Sky was going to people saying, okay, you want to have Sky Sports and Sky Movies. How about we sell you your telephone and your internet as well as a triple package, much like American cable companies. Mm-hmm. And so what BT felt they needed was a alternative to that offer, particularly because Sky was refusing to let BT sell Sky Sports channels through its own cable package. And that's where BT Sport came in. Long court case, much litigation. Sky BT have done a deal. BT can now sell Sky Sports channels through its pay TV platform. So BT almost don't need BT Sport anymore. And that's why they're being much more cautious. That's why Sky can kind of ease up. And that's why you had this auction for the EPL rights, where actually Amazon got one of the last packages because neither Sky nor BT wanted to spend more on getting the extra games.
So, because when I was teaching at Stanford, somebody from actually one of the major sports networks in the United States was with me, and they used the EPL thing as kind of like this thing that, okay, we've hit the peak, and it didn't happen in the United States, and this is actually several months back. But we've hit the peak, and the EPL is like the first league, major league in their home country in the UK market, where even if it turned out somewhat close, it was far less, they were expecting the big increase like you always get, and it didn't happen. And it was kind of like the EPL thing was told to me like, okay, this is the first sign and it's coming to the United States soon. And it hasn't come to the United States yet because WWE and UFC both came after this point and both got huge increases, although UFC probably in the end, you know what, I can't say they didn't get what they wanted because privately I know they did, but in a sense they didn't because what WWE got was so much more, and obviously they expected they would get far more than WWE, as did most people up until the very end, when it kind of became clear that Fox was so big into getting WWE and they were not as big into UFC anymore. Based on, I think, the idea that WWE could carry a weekly rating, which is another story because I look at the SmackDown numbers as compared to what Fox has been doing the last couple of weeks on Friday night, and it's that's going to be a story when it happens as far as how competitive they're going to have to they're going to be and what type of hot shots they're going to have to do to maintain a network level rating on a Friday night.
But here's a question: will Fox be a real network?
Yeah, that's another one.
That's because I did an article a few months ago about WWE TV deals and stuff like that. And the reality is whatever you look at WWE, even when they're at their hottest, other than USA Network, it's either struggling or fledgling networks that want WWE. So, UPN, Spike. And me, you look at My Network.
Yeah.
You look at Fox. The reality is the Murdochs don't want Fox. They don't want Fox Sports. The cable station. They just can't get rid of them due to antitrust reasons. They can't get rid of Fox because Disney has ABC. They can't get rid of Fox Sports because Disney has ESPN. They just need to park these things until they can find somebody else to sell them. What they're all going into is Fox News, it's the newspapers, it's the books. That's always been the Murdoch family's passion. And so what they want is cheap, easy programming that can just keep that station ticking over until they can find someone to sell it to. And this is where the brilliance of SmackDown, they just have solved 3 programming cycles with one deal. They can just forget about Fridays and go and deal with everything else. Yeah. So it might be SmackDown is bubbling along at 2 million, but actually for this new Fox, that's acceptable.
I do want to ask this as far as, what is your thoughts as far as Revolution Pro on television, the value of free sport, if there is a value to it, where free sports had the, the wrestling show that completely bombed just a couple of months ago. This is a completely different thing. Obviously, they're not going to be taping in 10,000 seat buildings with 800 fans. But it's still, again, wrestling's a weird thing because in the UK, it's like, there's a cult audience for wrestling, and this also ties into the ratings failure of World of Sport. There's a cult audience for wrestling that can fill 1,000-seat buildings, and you can bring in the best foreign independent guys and the New Japan guys and have great matches and great fans and great shows. But, it's not something, none of those things are something that can, do a network rating, and again, here's another thing. You suggested that you thought it would be more on our show before, and in your own writing, that it would be more beneficial for Sky to actually use the local promotions and drop the WWE for different reasons. So you kind of talk about that.
Yeah, so to take Rev Pro first, the channel I compare Free Sports to in terms of American channel is something like Destination America. It's a channel that everybody who has what Americans would call cable has, but they may not realize it and they may not watch it. It's actually got a pretty decent position in the dial. It is actually embedded in the other sports channels. So we'll see. I mean, I was looking at their viewing figures. Their most watched programming tends to get around about 60,000. So it's not a highly watched station. In terms of the programming, the key thing I'm always interested in, because you're getting a lot of, like the Fight Network in the UK, a lot of promotions are getting like edited highlights of the stuff they produce themselves being chucked on at weird hours. If you listen to Andy Quilden's podcast, real money has been invested in this. The station and Rev Pro have chipped in to get a proper production company in to actually shoot the shows. It's a company that shot boxing at Your Call before. I've spoken to people who are at the tapings. They did actually dress the ring differently and dress the arena differently to what they usually do for Rev Pro shows. Quilden's talked about the fact that although the live crowd couldn't see it because there's no point because of acoustics, we were getting the guys do interviews. They brought in Kevin Kelly as a commentator to try and give it that oomph. So hopefully it'll be a good show. It's an hour show. They're looking at 3 to 4 matches each week. Great talent. The first show has it's headlined by Zack Sabre versus Kushida. So they are putting a strong foot forward. Looks like Chris Brooks of CCK fame. He's going to be a big focus. He's one of probably the biggest star, along with Jimmy Havoc, that's not affiliated to either New Japan or WWE UK. So it could work, because the reality is, say if they went in and they got 30, 40,000 viewers on Free Sports, that would make first or second most watched program on that station, depending on the week. And that's still way more eyeballs on their product than they get for their on-demand service. So if they get it where the figures add up for them, Free Sports is happy and will keep helping to pay for the production truck, this could actually be a big deal for them. And this has always been my thing, why I was never overly optimistic about ITV. That bar to be viable on network television, the reality is that outside of Mexico, pro wrestling just can't meet it now in the post-kayfabe era. It's just not something the mainstream audience wants to watch. So you look at I'm doing an article for the next issue of Fight and Spin magazine about World of Sport. Even that really disappointing first viewing figure, the 900,000, that's still about equivalent to what Raw was doing in America over the summer. It's not actually as terrible a rating as it sounds, except the fact ITV is a big, big deal, and you need to pass a certain threshold to be successful on ITV. So we'll see with Revolution and Pro Wrestling. I think it could actually be a fairly nice thing for them. It can actually give them a new platform to make new fans. I think the key question for them, these tapings were quite last minute, and so they didn't have access to a lot of their champions, so people like David Starr, Suzuki. Moving forward, after they get these tapings out of the way, will they be able to kind of tie these in to their normal live specials? Because they don't want to get into the trap of what happened with Ring of Honor when they debuted on what was then HDNet, where the HDNet shows a completely different universe to everything else they're doing. So how they manage that synchronization will be interesting. In terms of World of Sport, I just think, who was meant to watch that show? I mean, that's always a question I come back to. They sell it heavily to begin with, that this is, World of Sport is coming back to ITV. And it worked because they got an audience that's skewed over 45. And you pretty much have to be over 45 to remember World of Sport now. And then they presented a very Americanized product that had completely different rules, that had no connection to World of Sport whatsoever except the name. And so they lost a big chunk of that audience that was kind of brought in that this was going to be a revival of British wrestling. And then they couldn't keep the hardcore new British wrestling fans because it was so clearly aimed at children, so clearly aimed at a family audience.
Yet they drew no children.
And again, and the children thing is because it's just a terrible, terrible time to draw families because, you know, children want to play outside, they want to play video games, they want to go out and do stuff. It didn't kind of appeal to anybody. And so it made no surprise. I mean, I did a review for the front page and I'm saying, look, this show doesn't work. It's not getting any characters over. It doesn't have a clear message about what pro wrestling is. And, you know, sadly, we were proven right. You know, I mean, by the end, it was embarrassing. And what happened is they kind of settled in at like half the audience they got for the premiere, so around about 500,000. And ITV were petrified that having that as a lead-in for their prime time shows was going to kill them in prime time. And that's why they had to boot it, first to 4 p.m. and then to 2:30, because they couldn't risk it hurting their prime time lineup.
Right.
So it's a really bad scene, and I think they just didn't think. So it's like they say they want to draw children. It's actually quite a bland roster when you go through that roster. There are pro wrestlers working British wrestling that have much more larger than life gimmicks. Like you got some really interesting ones, like people like Chuck Mambo come in with all the beach balls going into the ring. People like Spike Trevay that are doing like a Tory gimmick. In terms of foreigners, you have people like Chris Wolf, and who's Chris Wolf. So there were people they could have gotten that might have actually appealed to children by being those larger than life characters, and they just didn't. You know, it's a really baffling program. Just full stop. I have no idea who they thought would want to watch it.
What do you think they do? Because it's, you know, obviously they're trying to merchandise it. They're doing a house show tour, which is not knocking them dead at all. And perhaps if those two things are maybe the last ditch effort to say if one of these things hits, we'll renew it. I mean, there's been no announcement of a renewal or a cancellation at this point, and the show is off the air. So what do you? I mean, is there any sense? I mean, I know when I was in the UK, people involved in the show were, you know, very confident still of a second season, but the ratings fell from even when I was there, which was only a couple weeks ago. They fell pretty drastically with the time slot move. So I'm wondering, like, where does that stand?
Well, I mean, even like Martin Goldsmith was the people you're talking about, and he was talking to like Andy Croydon and saying, "Oh no, we're definitely going to try and we're definitely confident there's going to be a second season. There's somebody in ITV that really wants pro wrestling, stuff like this."
There are people at that network that really wanted to succeed, but at the same time, you still have your laws of television. You can want it all you want if the viewers aren't there. There's, you know, at some point, the decision has to be made.
So I think there's a few things. The first of all is how much money is ITV actually spending? Because that program was clearly very cheaply made, and there was no, they weren't using licensed music, they weren't using doing on location vignettes to kind of get the guys over. They clearly were trying to produce as cheaply as possible. It might be it's cheap enough to produce that they'll kind of put it at a bad time slot, Saturday afternoon, Sunday morning, and just do it as a vanity project with some ITV executive. One of the interesting things, which I talk about in the article, is clearly there's a link between World of Sport and NJPW. You look at, so that's Next Generation Wrestling, which is the promotion that has the Butlins wrestling camp contract. And, you know, you look at their big show at the end of September, it was basically World of Sport. All the World of Sport key guys have been featured. People like Shaw Simons, Rampage, Kip Sabian, Nathan Cruz, Joe Hendricks, Adam Maxted. They were all featured all over this show. So potentially, if it's cheap enough to make, the people behind it may just keep it going as a way to maybe get a toy deal, maybe give NJPW a boost. That's one scenario. The second is they just go back to the drawing board. I mean, to me, one of the reasons why I said it would make sense for Sky to do their own wrestling, is you get all the ancillary profits. You get the live gates, you get the pay-per-view buys, etc., etc., etc. ITV is trying to get into pay-per-view. They're getting into pay-per-view boxing. They've launched their own ITV box office channel. Go back to drawing board. Do a more serious pro wrestling product that is actually aimed at adults. Put it on one of their cable channels like ITV4. Even if it's only getting 100, 150,000, if you do a good enough product that you can then convince 20, 30,000 people to buy a pay-per-view at the end of the season, that could work. That potentially could be a model that is actually a viable business model for your ITV wrestling. But this appealing to children, I just don't think there's a market. I mean, because like none of the big promotions that are knocking them dead in Britain are ones that appeal to children. I mean, Progress doesn't let them in the UK. You can't bring anybody under 14 to a Progress show in the UK.
So I guess the thing I was talking about when it came to the UFC, they just recently announced the deal with 11 Sports, which is an over-the-top network, and then Bellator actually is on regular TV, and we were at the Bellator show in San Jose. And they had the unfortunate situation where they went off before the main event was over.
Before it even started, they were walking to the ring for the main event when it went off the air.
So does being that the two different TV deals, the vibe we were getting was Bellator was very excited to be able to be on this channel and really start doing a lot more shows out there in the UK. Do they have an opportunity to really grab a foothold in that area?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I call this with Bellator 200. The UFC is a shambles in this country, and it has been for a long time. They had it. They were lucky when they had people like Dan Hardy, Michael Bisping, that they could shove in front of UK crowds and do well. Other than Darren Till, and I think his appeal is quite localized in Liverpool, but they just don't have the big stars that they can use for us and without wasting big fights in America. Take UFC first. BT have lost interest in them. So when Dave was here during the Darren Till fight, so if an event that actually starred a British guy, showing it live, that's fine. The prime time repeat, because obviously UFC in Britain is like 3 a.m. It starts at 3 a.m. in the morning. So the prime time repeat for that show began at 1 a.m. the Monday morning. They would not put it on at 9, 10 p.m. like they used to. They've just completely lost interest in it. They don't market it. It's just not working. So to me, actually, 11 Sports might be a good thing. One, it's more accessible for UFC fans that don't want to have BT Sports. Like personally myself, I cancelled BT Sports a long time ago. I just rely on Fight Pass because we get the shows 2 days after they've aired live. So it's only, I think it's £6 to sign up to. So that will be a positive. The other positive is 11 Sports say for the really big fights, they will wholesale them to another broadcaster. So your big Conor McGregor fights moving forward, what they'll do is they'll go to ITV, to BT, to Sky and say, we've got Conor McGregor. How much do you want to put him on pay-per-view? And this is something that UFC needs to do for a long time. What they've been trying to do is get a UK broadcaster that can put the big fights on pay-per-view and give it maximum exposure, but will take all their small shows that no one's really interested in watching, and no one except the major channels, people like Sky just don't want that much content late at night. Like, it's expensive to do a live broadcast in the middle of the night. They just don't want the hassle for what is a niche sport in the UK. So, you have 11 Sports for your hardcores, and then your big shows, you wholesale out. The one danger they have is that Sky and BT aren't happy with 11 Sports for taking a lot of blue chip programming off them. So will they actually be willing to do a deal with 11 Sports to wholesale these big fights? That is debatable. But to me, in theory, if they can get the big fights onto a Sky box office, onto an ITV box office, whilst the hardcores get everything through 11 Sports, that's probably an upgrade, in all honesty. In terms of Bellator, the key thing with Bellator is that they and Channel 5 of the Channel 5 group are owned by the same people. They're both Viacom properties. Viacom bought Channel 5, I think, a couple of years ago. I'm not sure how often they'll be on Channel 5. I can't see any confirmation that the Fedor Sonnen's show is going to be on Channel 5 on Saturday. The key thing, though, is that part of the Channel 5 group is the UK version of Spike, which is a basic cable. I think it's on Freeview, which is kind of the very basic form of cable. But it's definitely, everybody who has Sky, everybody who has Virgin gets Spike. And so they actually have a very strong platform to just get ordinary people to watch it. It's a much, much higher visibility than UFC's had since about 2008. And they're investing in bringing big shows over to the UK. So Scott Coker's doing a press conference this week, and he's talking about going to Manchester, Birmingham, London, I think Newcastle. They're talking about doing 5 or 6 shows here next year. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's absolutely a very strong chance Bellator overtakes UFC over the next year, because they want it and they have the platform to kind of get the message out. And I think Coker's good at booking hometown stars. So once he gets a few, protecting them. So once he gets a few British guys that are his guys to get over in this market, he'll know how to book them to protect them.
Yeah. I mean, and then that's the goal. The goal is to sign, and I guess it would be guys from Bama and from some other promotions, and work with those promotions, not be enemies of those promotions, and find the good prospects, and then put them on television as your UK stars. And I mean, Scott's model obviously was Kung Lee in San Jose, and he did a wonderful job with Kung Lee in San Jose. I mean, for years and years and years, the guy headlined here and always drew well. Up until he was 40 years old, he had a great career here.
Yeah. So no, I mean, I can't stress enough that the UFC missed a boat in this country. They didn't adjust when people like Bisping and Dan Hardy decided to slow down, and they needed to bring some of the foreign stars over to get some buzz. And I mean, now, they did the Darren Till show back in May. That's probably it for us this year. So yeah, the UFC is really, really dropped, which is hilarious because Conor McGregor gets more attention than UFC ever did, but they're just not in a position to capitalize. Everything that happened on Saturday, front page of the BBC Sports website. I was in Germany at the time. I had people texting me, "Did you see what happened with Conor?"
Yeah.
But it's like, I think in many ways in Britain, I can't talk for Ireland, but in Britain, it's like Conor is bigger than UFC. Conor's spoken about like a major boxer.
Yeah.
In the sense of you wouldn't when you think of Floyd Mayweather, you don't think of the WBC.
Yeah.
Conor McGregor is Conor McGregor. He's a big star. UFC is just kind of, it missed its moment.
Is there anything else we didn't hit that you guys wanted to talk about?
Is there any other subjects that you feel as far as on the UK scene, as far as changes going forward, 2019 and the UK scene?
So a few ones. So first of all, we have Progress. So right. Progress is their big show a couple of weeks ago. Got 4,750 fans in Wembley Arena. This is one of these really weird. The way I compare it is, imagine if All In got 8,000 fans. That'd be a huge achievement beyond people's wildest imagination a year ago. But they set themselves a certain bar and they didn't quite meet it. Progress were very clear going into that show when they announced it, that this was going to be the biggest show in UK indie wrestling for 30 years. That meant they had to get 6,000 fans, over 6,200 fans to beat ICW's record from a couple of years ago, and they didn't quite do it. So that's interesting in itself, and I think it talks actually a bit about the fact that some of the hardcore fans a bit alienated from Progress. So like OTT and Idol were able to run against them. Other shows were running against them, and they were still able to draw well because actually some people just prefer to go to their local product. The other thing with Progress is moving forward, what is their priority? So, for example, they're not running WrestleMania weekend. Now, they're saying it's because it's too expensive to run. I'm sure it's very expensive. But we all know the reason is they'll be busy working for WWE that weekend, and so they can't run a show. Like when you're busy running around working on the NXT takeover, you can't be running your indie show. Likewise, they were doing midweek shows at a venue called the Dome, not O2 Dome, Tough Mill Dome. They've given up that venue to another promotion. So it certainly seems like moving forward, they may be a leaner show, doing less shows. But again, it's how do they balance their WWE? Like they've released their dates for their season tickets. So I don't know if you know this, Garrett. So the way it works in the UK, so you take something like PWG, the equivalent in the UK that runs a regular venue. They at this time of the year they'll say, okay, here's our dates for a forthcoming year. If you want to guarantee your ticket, you buy them up front. So you literally give the promotion a lump sum, and then you have your ticket for all those shows for the forthcoming year. What Progress have had to say is we can't guarantee that these won't be moved if they clash with WWE UK taping because they're working those tapings.
Yeah.
And as are 75% of their talent. So where Progress goes is very interesting. They are going back to Alexander Palace for British Strong Style, the big 3-day tournament. They are hinting they may go back to Wembley. So, and I would, because it was a good show. It felt Major League. They had a great main event. Maybe with a bit more build, and maybe a guest star or two. They could actually go one better if they run it again. So that's Progress. The fascinating political story is Fight Club Pro. So what you have this very weird situation with the WWE UK contracts. You actually have people under contract as WWE running around owning their own promotions. So Fight Club Pro is co-owned by Trent Seven. Attack Pro Wrestling is actually owned by Pete Dunne. And Fight Club Pro is running a show in Korakuen Hall, I think on the 7th of July. It's the Monday after the Tokyo Dome.
January 7th, not July.
January 7th.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating with that is that could be a debut of a lot of the big UK and European talent. So, British Strong Style were in the ring for the announcement, so you have to assume they're going over for that big show. Walter's their number one contender, so there's a good chance he's going over for that show. So that could be like this really interesting thing where you actually have a lot of this indie in Wolverhampton is actually doing big debuts in Japan for a lot of named talent that in theory WWE or in theory WWE could have beaten them to the gun. And what it also talks about is the idea that wrestling tourism is coming to Tokyo Dome. Like part of what it seems like they've realized, there are a lot of Westerners going over to watch New Japan. And there's a chance for foreign promotions to piggyback off onto that and actually get a crowd that they wouldn't reach it otherwise. And then finally, it has to be said, for the first time I went to WXW. I went for their tag league last weekend. And Dave, you were talking about the OTT crowd going there. You need to add the Oberhausen arena for WXW. It was pretty crazy. I mean, 5 shows in 3 days. All the shows were great. The production standards were cut above even the big UK indies. And I have mixed feelings on it, but they had a match between Bobby Guns and Eli Dragunov where literally the fans would not stop chanting for 15 minutes.
I heard that match was unbelievable.
And I thought, like, the finishing stretch was good. I felt it's kind of like Bizarro World, Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns, where the fans would almost kill the match with love because there was no crowd reaction to anything the guys were doing because the crowd were just doing this dueling chant.
Yeah, the
match just washed over you. Like it was a fantastic experience. No one there will ever forget it. But you literally couldn't judge what was happening. Particularly for like British and European indie wrestling, where so much of it is based on hearing the sounds of the chops and the hits. it was a very surreal atmosphere. But yeah, I mean, I think they're the major ones for me. But yeah, no, that WXW, the setup they have is I'd say is superior to any British promotion I've been to this year.
All right, Will. Really appreciate you hanging out with us here tonight. Outside of the Fighting Spirit magazine, and sometimes you're also writing for the Observer. Where can people find you?
So they can find me on Twitter at Will Calling. I also do reports my local newspaper, FSM Star, so very much focused on people like Pete Dunne, Trent Seven, Tyler Bay, Chris Brooks. And Fighting Spirit magazine, it's available in Britain in all good newsstands, worldwide through Pocket Mags. And in this month's issue, I take a look at intergender wrestling.
Well, that's a real interesting topical subject. I mean, do you have any... I mean, it's funny, for me, with intergender wrestling, my traditionalist part of me from being a fan for so long, and you want wrestling to look real, and obviously, like in boxing or kickboxing or MMA, you could never do this. And in old pro wrestling, you could do it in a very, there's ways you could do it, but you certainly wouldn't want to do it much. In modern pro wrestling, people who have grown up with it, and I mean, the thing is because the women wrestlers in the United States are so much more athletic than they were even 5 years ago, and because the men are stronger and base better, I mean, the women love to work with men. Number one, it ups their game. They're working with people with more experience. And number two, they can do things in the ring that they can't do, and there's a dynamic that gets over. And, I've seen enough to know it can be entertaining as hell. So, go ahead.
No, I mean, that's basically very much me. When I started going to indie wrestling a lot last year, and the first few times, it kind of took me back a bit. I remember there was a brilliant British Strong Style versus Sendai Girls trios match in Chikara in Wolverhampton last year. And both teams just kicked the ever-living shit out of each other. And to begin with, it's almost a little bit uncomfortable, and you have to kind of get yourself into the groove. To me, the thing is if you're letting significantly smaller guys go up against significantly bigger guys, that realism argument's already been lost. Like if Jonathan Gresham can go toe to toe with Walter and a crowd buy it, and I saw that at the weekend. They do and they can. Then there's not really an argument to not let women go toe to go against each other. Like I'll give an example. So I was at Fight Club Pro a couple of weeks ago, and they were doing a tag team match, like a big, I think it was 10-person tag team match, 8-person tag team match, and they had exchanges between Mecha Satomura and Walter.
Right,
now,
I heard about this.
On paper, that should not work.
Yeah,
but by the end of those exchanges, there is no doubt in my mind that what the match that most people in that arena wanted to see was Mecha versus Walter, and I'm sure when they do that match, it's going to be incredible. And because there was such instant chemistry between the two of them. So to me, it's like, particularly on the indie level, where there's only so many stars, let men and women fight because you just broaden the canvas. And like you said, like you look at in Britain, like the biggest prospect for women's wrestling in Britain is Millie McKenzie. And one of the reasons is that she's been training and wrestling with men since she was about 16. Next week, Tony Storm and Chris Ridgway are going to do a match, which is quite interesting because they're engaged together. So I think for indies, it's fine. For WWE, to me, I just want them to pick one. Like, if you don't want to do intergender matches, that's fine. I really dislike this thing where they'll do intergender violence, but only the women can hit the men.
Yeah.
Because I think that's almost reinforcing sexist tropes more than just saying we just don't do it. Mm-hmm. So to me, I just pick one. I can well understand why they don't want to do it, but then again, look, you've got Disney blockbusters, and they're full of male supervillains beating up female superheroes. So I'm not sure there's as big a taboo as we sometimes think. But yeah.
And so where can people find that article? Is it out yet, or is it upcoming?
It's out. It's out yet. So it's in Fight and Spin magazine. So if you go onto pocketmags/FSM, pocketmags.com/FSM, you can get that and all sorts of good stuff, including a really interesting Jim Cornette column where he looks at the best managers in history.
Oh, wow.
That's great.
I always love the Jim Cornette articles. The historical articles are awesome.
Oh, yeah, they are the no, even including my writing, they're the highlight of each issue. I couldn't quite do it, and he loved Walter versus Jordan Devlin, so I was quite happy we finally got a new wrestler that he enjoyed. So
he likes Walter. Yeah, good. Yeah.
Yes, he likes Walter.
Yeah.
All right, Will. Thanks again, and thanks to everyone who was listening.